Our world is lost in unnecessary fear and hurt. Our systems seem scientifically engineered to make you small, powerless, and always waiting for the next great leader who will fix the problems around us. Worse, we're witnessing neighbor versus neighbor while warfare breaks out around our family tables. But you have access to a spirit, a strength that enlarges and empowers you. Even better, you don't need to wait for the next big movement. You can heal the world. It's time for governance by grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. Sponsored by ZeroAggressionProject.org. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, stream, download, and otherwise make your presence known because Jim and I value that. And we have a very special episode for you today. Jim, tell us about our guests.
Well, before I do that, I just want to say the views and opinions that may be expressed here will not necessarily be those of the Zero Aggression Project, which is a nonpartisan organization. We're not endorsing any candidates for public office in this conversation, and you will find that I am temperamentally opposed to doing so. So we are I want to make sure that that's not confused on anybody's part. I also want to say that we're going to delve into a topic that's hot in the news right now and important to a lot of people that I and their guests happen to know in common. And I'm interested in trying kind of gently here and trying to foster a conversation. So
I thought you were going to say aggressively and do the talking head square fight thing.
We're going to stay with a zero aggression approach. How's that? But I think that you're going to hear some strong opinions, and I hope you do. And I think maybe we should air some things out. And the issue is that Donald Trump is going to.
Sorry, just a moment. that Donald Trump?
Same one.
The real Donald Trump.
The former president is going to appear, even though he is the likely nominee of the Republican Party, at the Libertarian National Convention. He's scheduled to be there on the Friday night of the convention, we'll get to the dates and times of that in just a moment, because we have somebody who is planning to be at the convention as one of our guests today. He's going to be appearing there. And this immediately caused a lot of consternation within libertarian circles. So the question is, should the Libertarians party with Donald Trump? That's our main question here today. And we've got great guests, Bill, in order to do this. First, I want to bring in Dan Fishman because this is his first time on the podcast. We've not had Dan with us before.
I've been dying to be on.
Yes. And
wow.
And I know that you've been passing around a couple of the episodes, so I very much appreciate that.
You bet.
Dan is here. We're going to get a little bit more introduction in a second, but Dan is chosen to be here because he and I have worked together in nonprofit situations before. We're friends, full disclosure. But he is a former national director of the Libertarian Party. It's an executive director position. And we have a second national director. In fact, he's a two-time national director, Perry Willis. Perry Willis was last national director in the 1990s during the Harry Brown era of the Libertarian Party. And I'm going to give both of them an opportunity to give a little bit of an expanded bio of who they are and what their interest in the Libertarian Party is. But before I do that, before you guys introduce yourself, let's start with this very, very important question. Get it out front, and that is, what is libertarianism and why should people care about it? Dan?
I think the best definition of libertarianism is the radical idea that you know what should happen with your body and with your life better than anybody else. Secondly, in that idea is that although there may be a lot of people who want to help you to improve your life and they have the best of all possible intentions, you'll find that the people who prefer to leave you alone make the best possible neighbors. That's the essence of libertarianism, is find a way for us to live together without trying to tell each other how to improve our lives.
Amen. Perry?
Gosh, it's been so long since I've done this. I think I've forgotten what libertarianism is about. Let me see if I can remember here. Dan's was excellent. I would frame it this way. The mainstream political contest is about gaining the political power to impose your personal preferences on other people. Libertarianism is about not using power to do that. It's about leaving you free to make your own choices by your own preferences without imposing those preferences on other people. I think that's it.
Okay.
Stick one last button hook on there.
Go ahead.
It's a Jim Babka quote. Understanding the difference between coercion and conversion. The idea that you would never use force to make somebody do something, but you might try to argue with them, convince them, whatever. The plural noun of a group of libertarians is an argument. It's an argument of libertarians. And that is what we do. We work really hard to try to convince people of the way that we would do things, but we'll never tell you that's how you have to do it.
Reminds me of a comic book forum by Tony Isabella, a former writer for Marvel Comics. And he would talk about politics all the time. And occasionally, meaning all the time, libertarians would show up. And Tony Isabella referred to the libertarians as the professionals, the professional arguers.
Yeah, fair.
Yep. Okay. So now you know something about libertarianism. What is the importance of the Libertarian Party? And in your answer, please tell me how you got involved in the Libertarian Party. I'll go with Perry first this time.
I was excited about the Ronald Reagan campaign in 1980 because it had a lot of libertarian rhetoric. I did not see the Ed Clark for President TV ads, but my uncle did, and he told me about them. And so I looked up the Libertarian Party and I called him for information. I got the packet from the LP headquarters of maybe a week after the election and decided I'd voted for the wrong person. I should have voted for Ed Clark instead. I guess I got introduced to the ideas by Robert Heinlein's novel, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. And what was there? What was the rest of
Yeah,
the
so
question,
what's
Jim?
the importance of the Libertarian Party then?
Well, the Libertarian Party gives people a way to vote for something that isn't trying to impose their personal preferences on other people. It gives them an alternative for their vote to the Democrats and Republicans. So I think that's a major importance of it. I think another major importance of it is that the presidential campaign in particular allows a lot of people to hear the libertarian message who wouldn't have heard it before.
Dan?
Our stories are shockingly similar. Also a reader, especially of Heinlein juveniles in my early teens. I was attracted to the Reagan campaign. I grew up in an academic household. My father's a scientist, my mother's a librarian, and that means Democrat, right? Hardcore Democrat. Reagan came along. I liked the stuff he said. It really irritated my parents. That's where I wanted to be. As I got further into it, I thought a lot of the stuff that Reagan said, the idea of smaller governments and getting things out of the way. However, Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson convinced me the Republican Party didn't want people like me. Full disclosure, I was raised Jewish, didn't stick. I don't go to a temple or anything, but I certainly identify culturally in that space. So then I kind of wandered around a little bit, but I had the great good fortune that I grew up in Galveston, Texas. So my congressman was Ron Paul. So I got to hear Ron Paul speak, just on regular campaign stops, stuff like that. And, one of my favorite Ron Paul quotes, last time he was running for president, they did a debate at the Reagan Library in California. And they asked him, do you think Ronald Reagan would endorse you? And Ron Paul was able to say, actually, Ronald Reagan came out and walked with me in 1976 when I was running for Congress. So yes, I think Ronald Reagan endorsed me. I became activated as a libertarian in 2012 when Barack Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act, saying that without any reason, just suspicion of terrorism, the government could lock you up, seize you without right to a speedy attorney, suspend due process, all in the name of the war on terror. My family came over from Ukraine specifically because my great-grandfather was disappeared one day by the police for nobody knows why. They're just gone. My family came to the United States because it is a country where the police can't do that, where there is a rule of law and the laws are of the people, by the people, and for the people, not for the government. As for what libertarianism means, that's it. It is that line in the sand, that thing that we say, you know what? There are certain things that no matter what, we are not going to give in on these. And, it used to be that they were American values. It used to be that freedom of speech was an American value. But now, is you say, we're all of an age that we can remember people saying, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say that. Can you imagine a Republican or a Democrat saying that now? All they want is the last word. All they want is to shut people up. And so what libertarians represent, rightfully, we gleefully accept that term as the arguers in the room, because we're the people who will not go gently into that good night. If we've got a point to make, if we're going to argue that, it doesn't matter what a person's gender is. It doesn't matter what their country of origin is. It doesn't matter what their socioeconomic status is. They are deserving of the same respect under law and the same respect from their fellow humans. That's what libertarianism represents to me. And it's what the Libertarian Party, until very recently, used to represent for me.
Okay, so Dan, how is it that you end up becoming a national director, and what give us a little bit about who you are?
So I'm a software guy. In the right room, I frequently will say, "Pete, my patents." I was the inventor of the technology that everybody watches this podcast. Everybody in the room uses the idea of syncing addresses and events between your mobile phone and a computer in the internet. I worked for a company called Palm. The gray hairs will remember the old Palm Pilot. That's where we invented that stuff. I'm a software guy. That's what we do. 2012, like I said, I got activated. I ran as a libertarian, but I didn't really have a desire to do anything more than what I'd done at the time. I ran for Congress. But I got lucky, and I have a little bit of the gift for gab. And in the first debate, people realized the debates were better when I was there. So I ended up getting invited to every debate. This was John Tierney against Richard Desai in Massachusetts, and for Massachusetts 6. And crazy race. Richard Desai, the Republican, is an out married gay man who's pro-choice. John Tierney, the Democrat, his wife had just gone to jail for money laundering, and he personally was pro-life. But that's Massachusetts politics. So that race got me noticed by Bill Weld, who, full disclosure, has since become a friend. He wrote me a very nice handwritten note saying, Dan, you were the best candidate in the race, and if you were in my district, I would have voted for you. That started a little correspondence for us. I got involved in trying to help the Massachusetts Libertarian Party to become better at what they did. And in 2016, when Bill Weld was given the tap on the shoulder to be the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, he said, Dan, I need you in the campaign. I was, of course, working full time, but I talked to my employer, who let me take a sabbatical. And so I went and became senior field director for the Northeast for the Johnson Weld campaign. That was a great experience because I got to see the difference between a real campaign and what libertarians had done in the past. And a real campaign is Bill Weld being able to call anybody and get on the air at any time. Standing offer. It was seeing him raise $100,000 a day on the phone, 40 consecutive days. It was the idea that the candidate is, surrounded by a team of people who have to be unbelievably loyal because the candidate can't function. To see all that stuff happen, that was an amazing thing. And that was the best campaign the Libertarian Party has ever run. I don't think there's any question about that. Certainly in terms of money raised, certainly in terms of media exposure, stuff like that. And I thought that was awesome. And it was so good that in 2018, when Bill Weld was thinking about running for president in 2020, he said, Dan, I need some libertarian races to endorse. You should run in Massachusetts. And so, again, even though I was working full time, I ran for state auditor in Massachusetts. So we hit on the good slogan, why would you elect a Republican or a Democrat to audit Republicans and Democrats? And to make a long story short, I was endorsed by the Boston Globe over the incumbent Democrat. And what does that mean in a one-party state? It means 4.5%. So, but then the last thing that happened there was that 3 weeks before the election, I was speaking to League of Women Voters in Wellesley, Massachusetts. And that essentially means Democrat squared. I couldn't say two more Democratic words, League of Women Voters, Wellesley, Massachusetts. And I got up and I gave them my speech, and I could see that I was reaching them. I've done it enough that I could see the heads nodding. And at the end of it, and I said, so I'm here to ask for your vote to try to change things. Big round of applause, stuff like that. And the woman stands up, she says, Dan, I love everything about you. Like, you would be an amazing auditor. It would be great for the state if you were elected. But the party has said that if I don't vote blue all the way down the line, that shows weakness in the Democratic Party. And that allows Donald Trump to build the wall. And I cannot have that. And people started clapping. I'm like, wow, the country is really and truly behind the eight ball. That choice of phrasing in deference to the show. Behind the eight ball here, and I have the capacity to do something about it. So Nick Sarwark asked me if I would become the executive director of the Libertarian Party. And the thing that I know is that I'm really good at doing things. If you ask me to do a thing, it will be done. And that's what the Libertarian Party needed at that point in time. So that's how I became executive director, a post of which I remained until 2021. Okay,
so your pathway is software design, but you end up running for office. You do a good enough job, you get the attention, you end up being able to become national director.
Yeah.
Perry, your
Well, I want to start out by saying that while Dan grew up in Galveston, Texas, I almost drowned there.
It was not me. It was not me.
Fortunately, my cousin Audrey came out and saved me. But, I didn't learn my lesson about living near the ocean. So eventually I ended up living in San Diego. And David Berglund was the 83-84 Libertarian Party presidential nominee. And he was doing a tour of San Diego. And I did the advance work. And they said that it was the best advance work they'd ever had it done. And so I ended up being hired to work in the campaign headquarters. I ended up running both the ballot drives and the fundraising program, where it turned out that I had a talent for direct mail. And from there, I ended up as national director in the middle 80s and then again in the middle 90s. And it was basically because I did a good job with an advance campaign and then turned out to have a talent for direct mail.
And one more thing on that subject, you did a project I like to always talk about, Project Archimedes. What was the thinking there?
Well, I think that politics is a numbers game. Who has the most votes, who has the most money, who has the most supporters. And the supporters are where the money comes from, and the votes come from that money. So you got to start out by having a support base equal to the people you're competing with. So Project Archimedes was an attempt to recruit enough libertarian supporters, enough libertarian donors to compete on an even basis with the Democrats and Republicans. We didn't obviously get anywhere close to that, or if we had, we would, be competing with them on an even basis. But we still were able to take the party to the highest level of membership it's ever had before or since. And I think maybe the highest income to before or since. I'm
yes,
not sure.
100% true. The highest income.
Yeah. Yep. So to this day, and that highest income is year 2000, folks.
Right. That's when money, $1 billion was real money.
Yeah. All right. So, and it's interesting that they haven't gotten back there since then. I mean, I find this endlessly fascinating that hasn't happened again. I may be too fascinated with that question of all the questions we could have about libertarians. But the question on the table today has to do with Donald Trump, who I think we've all heard of, showing up at an event. And this is the Libertarian National Convention that he's coming to. Let's be clear about that. And there has been some conflict. I've already seen a lot of people issuing statements. Candidates have been out. There's a guy running for chair of the Libertarian Party at this convention that issued a very strong statement. I would even go so far as to say he gilded the lily. He listed every single possible potential violation of ethics or principle or values or whatever that one could possibly conjure. And I also can't help noticing that obviously the invitation was made, and some people must have thought this was a good idea. And I'm wondering, is it good or is it bad? So Dan, a little more punchy here. Can you give us your take? Like, is this a good thing for the Libertarian Party to have a moment where this candidate comes and addresses and converses with the Libertarians?
It's a very bad thing. First of all, it's not unilateral, right? Trump is coming on his own. He's not coming with Biden. It's not a meeting of equals. It's a meeting where he deigns to meet with us and to come into the room and bless you poor libertarians, and let me preach to you of the gospel of Trump. And this is the problem.
Didn't they also invite both Kennedy and Biden to come and participate in this as well?
It may have happened. My argument is, I would say that yes, they certainly claim to have done that. I haven't heard any confirmation from either the Biden or Kennedy campaign.
And you're not expecting it?
Well, it would be interesting to know. It would be interesting just for them to say, I didn't hear anything. The problem, of course, is, what does that mean? Right? How were they invited? Were they invited because there was a webpage put up saying, hey, Joe Biden, if you see this webpage, please come speak at our convention? Because that may be what they're doing. It's pretty clear that this was communicated up the hierarchy of the Trump camp, because there's such close ties between the Mises Caucus and the Trump camp that, there actually is a Mises Caucus in the Republican Party too. So these close ties are the things that have allowed them to be there. And a great example of this is that, the largest single donor to the Mises Caucus, the founder of Overstock.com, whose name temporarily eludes me, but I'll get
Patrick Byrne, right?
Patrick Byrne, right. He was in the Oval Office January 6th with President Trump. So here's this Mises Caucus guy in the Oval Office while Trump's forces are storming the Capitol. And we're like, oh, yeah, you know what? Maybe you should come speak at our convention. Maybe you should diminish our candidates, because every libertarian who goes out there sweats. I don't want to use sweat twice, but blood, sweat, and tears for the presidential candidate. And the number one question we get is, we never hear from you guys during the rest of the time. You only show up when you're running for president, which is not true. We do all this hard work. We do everything we can to elevate our presidential candidates to the status of an official candidate. And yet here we are accepting the idea that we're not, that we need the grace, to quote the show, of Donald Trump.
Okay, but isn't it the case that he's bringing in light that would not be shown on the Libertarian Party? You just brought up the fact that we're kind of ignored all the time. I have a hard time believing this is the convention's in DC, right?
Yep.
You got the dates?
May 24th through 27th.
Okay, and this is on May 24th we're talking. I have a hard time believing that the entire media assembled, both the alternative media and the regime mainstream media, will be present when he addresses this audience. And this is going to be a newsworthy thing that another party invited a candidate from to come to their party. Yeah, and it's this particular candidate who has some media gets media coverage in the first place. You don't think he's bringing something here to them in that case?
I mean, I think the biggest media coverage that we got beforehand, right, is probably Aleppo. And before that, it's probably Terry McVeigh. There's the question about what kind of attention do you want? You can get a big light, right? You can get, this has been the argument of the Mises Caucus the entire time, is that they've been pushing out these incredibly controversial opinions, right? The New Libertarian Party of New Hampshire tweeted, libertarians believe in reparations. If you're black, you can have a ticket back to Africa or shut up. That doesn't help anybody, but it got a tremendous amount of attention. It was retweeted all over the place. Oh, this is where the libertarians are, stuff like that. Trump is a divisive figure. And whatever else you want to say about where the party is right now, if there's going to be anything going forward, there has to be at least an attempt at reconciliation. Bringing in Donald Trump as a speaker is not an attempt at reconciliation. It's an attempt at saying, we want all the people who like Trump to come over to our party. The people who like Trump but think the Republican Party is a little too passive. The Republican Party doesn't say the quiet parts out loud, but Donald Trump does. He says all the real things about, kicking out all the foreigners, locking down the borders, red flag laws, right? How could we invite a presidential candidate who's so strongly against gun owners? But that's what we're doing. To me, it diminishes the party. And is it
diminishes
about
the party's brand?
It diminishes the party's brand.
Okay, so Perry, speak to that. I'm curious what your take here is on what you're hearing. Is the brand going to be tarnished by this event?
I don't know. I really don't. I think Dan's argument is extremely reasonable. So it could be that it will be damaged. And I got to say that my argument for decades about free media, media coverage, you've all heard the cliche that any coverage is good coverage. But I've always thought, is it coverage that you would have been willing to pay for if it was advertising? And if it's not, then probably it's not good coverage. I see. So the coverage we get out of it may be bad, it may be good. The potential I see in it, if the people at that convention sees it, is perhaps a chance to get some people pardoned if he gets back into office. I would hope that the libertarians who were at that convention would be talking to him about Ross Ulbricht and Julian Assange in the questions they ask. And since he is going to be there, why not also ask some questions that might get the viewing audience, assuming C-SPAN covers this, to hear some libertarian positions. And if that could happen, then people would see that we are different from Trump, and that would be coverage that you would pay for if it was advertising.
Yeah, I'm interested in this whole question type thing because the party's out in front of this in the sense that they, in making this announcement, I believe they're already selling swag for the event. I believe that they are also trying to fundraise by selling off the opportunity to put a question in the hopper with a $10 a piece donation. And I'm I have to say, announcing that this event happens doesn't come without the following risk: that he doesn't actually show up, or that he shows up on video only, or that he shows up and says, no, I'm not going to play by your rules, and treats it like a normal rally and can largely get away with it because he's got the mic and the Secret Service and so forth. Like, how is it? I do wonder how they know that they're going to actually be able to ask real questions. When a rally goes on, all parties, and I'm not faulting anybody for doing this, but they usually adorn the backdrop with people who are clearly enthusiastic fans for the candidate. Where are those enthusiastic fans going to be found, if they're going to be found, in this setting? And are the questions themselves going to get asked?
Yeah.
If he expects this to be just another Trump rally and gets away with that, I think that would be very bad for the LP. It has to be an LP event where LP things get said at some point.
And nobody puts baby in a corner. Nobody puts Trump in a chair where you get to grill him and ask questions. Look what's happening in a court of law where people are trying to pin him down and make him do the things they want. Trump won't do the things that they want. He just got fined $10,000 because he won't play the game the way the government says they have. We don't have the ability to fine him $10,000. Why would he do anything other than come up and sell the thing that he sells best, which is Donald Trump? And, let's give the devil his due in this place. The man is an amazing spokesperson for his own cause. There are very few events that I've seen Donald Trump at where things have turned out wrong. Now, I will say, we talk a little bit about maybe they're going to get him to say, yeah, I'll free Ross, which would be great. I would do anything I can to free Ross.
Well, no, wait a minute. You would do anything you could to free Ross. Would that mean having Donald Trump to the Libertarian Convention?
Let me rephrase that. I would not do anything I can. I would do things that I consider ethical and give of myself, but I cannot commit to giving of anybody else. I would not do anything I can. I mean, I could kill people. I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
However, in the scenario where we're talking about, bringing Trump in, and what's going to happen in this case, first of all, his promises, what are they worth? But then the other thing, and this is the one thing that I kind of like about it, is that there's this big organized campaign right now that there's going to be a lot of signs, and there's going to be a lock him up chant from the audience. I think that's interesting. I don't know how Donald will take it. Will he storm off the stage?
Well, this is actually a very interesting question, and
will he turn off the video feed?
No, this is something I kind of wonder about. I think that so I spoke with Michael Heiss yesterday.
Yep.
Who
de facto chair of the Libertarian Party.
For people watching, he was the guy that was leading the Mises Caucus when they basically ran the takeover of the party. They are very organized, they were very efficient, and they won at the convention and elected their offices. And they've been doing that across the country. And they've now been running the party for nearly 2 years. So this is the first referendum on their management of the party. But Michael's the guy that kind of politically organized and funded and fueled all that stuff.
Well, wait. You can't say funded. We know that
he had to do some fundraising. He had to do fundraising.
Okay.
He had to do fundraising.
Yeah.
To do that. And he told me two things. And I think both of these, the degrees of this matter. He said first that he hopes that Trump is booed. He hopes that Trump actually gets pushed back at this event. And because he said this is what libertarians should do. There's clearly things we disagree with him on, and he should get a chance to learn what libertarianism is. But he said also that he's concerned, and I have to admit, there was a guy that came on the stage and danced, half naked at and this was all broadcast on television, and it did actually, I was hearing from people about it for 2, 3, 4 years after it happened. So it kind of stuck, right, that somebody would behave this way. He has a concern that holding up a mirror to some of the people in the party, that they will act like some of the college radicals, right? Behaving, in a very sophomoric fashion, very ugly fashion. And so maybe there's some degree here of like polite booing, right? Or disapproval, registering disapproval. Robert F. Kennedy comes out. We're going to come back to this in a moment, but he goes out to California. He gets listened to silently. Nobody boos anything he says the entire time he's talking. But I have this feeling that this is not going to be what happens at this event. So there's a concern, and this is why I'm raising it, that this could be a problem for the Libertarian Party and how they're projecting their image. Not just like, okay, Dan, you're making the point that he's coming in a bit and tainting the brand, but what are the people sitting there? What's the proper response to Donald Trump?
I'm going to jump on this one, Perry, because I know you have thoughts on it too. But when James Weeks got up and danced, essentially naked, so much flesh that he might as well have been naked. They asked Nick Sarwark about that, who was the chair at the time, afterwards, and he said, what happened at our convention was somebody got up on stage and they made an ass out of himself. We did not cut his mic because libertarians believe in freedom of speech. We did not physically remove him from the stage because libertarians believe in the non-aggression principle. When his 10 minutes was up, he left the stage, and then libertarians voted to remove him from the convention, which is what happened. So a man got up on stage, made an ass out of himself, libertarians behaved with decorum, and he was removed from the convention. In 6 weeks from now, at the Republican convention, a man is going to get up on stage and make an ass out of himself, and they're going to nominate him for president.
Wait. You're saying they're going to nominate Donald Trump for president?
Yeah, well, this is actually what Nick said because it was true in 2016, but it's also true
He's
here.
comparing.
No, I'm not saying the
did to
LP is going
what the
to nominate.
Republicans will do.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the end of Nick's quote. Okay, in 2016. Okay, got it.
And that's the thing about it is, what is our expected level of decorum? Well, it's an interesting question. We talked about this briefly about what is the Libertarian Party? Where are we about going gently into that good night? On the one hand, first of all, he was not invited by the Libertarian Party. He wasn't even invited by the LNC, right? It's now coming out that there was just a deal that the chair made. In fact, there is now a resolution before the LNC that has a second is going to be voted on to remove him from the thing, to essentially ban all presidential candidates from another party from speaking at the Libertarian Nominating Convention. It's a very interesting turn of events. It'll be interesting to see where the chips fall. And frankly, I think it reflects much better on the Libertarian Party if we uninvited him by rule of law, as opposed to invited him by droit de seigneur, the right of kings.
Well, I know where Dan stands, but Perry, you're on the LNC, and you've even been in a position before where you could have been the person making a similar type of invitation.
I'm not on the LNC. I have been in the past.
But it's so let's pretend you are now. How do you vote and why?
I think I would vote against this, doing this. The main reason I would vote against it is because he's an 800-pound gorilla. I don't think that the LP has any control over what he's going to do. And for it to turn into a Trump rally, I don't think would be good for the LP. If we don't get to ask questions of him or ask him for things like pardon this person, pardon that person, I don't think that's a good thing. I also don't think it's a good thing if the Libertarians boo him, because it's kind of rude without even really communicating what the alternative would be to what he's saying. There's no information really contained in a boo besides disapproval. At the same time, I understand that the convention audience that listened to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., even though they sat on their hands, which I think is the right way to do it, at the end, I understand they gave him a standing ovation.
They did.
I wouldn't want to see that happen either. So I've come to think, after thinking about this a bit more, that there's more to be lost here than to be gained. And the thing I think the most is he is an 800-pound gorilla, and he's going to control this. We're not going to control it.
Why now? That's the other thing about it. You know what? We're going to nominate a presidential candidate. Let's say, you know what? The convention ends Sunday, and we want to have you on stage with our presidential candidate. And then there's something there, right? Then it becomes
come debate our guy after we nominate him or her.
Exactly right. Then do it. Then there's something there. But right now,
but 4 years ago, I know because I was on standby. I knew that there was a possibility I was going to have to be in Chicago with about 24 hours notice, because there was a potential debate, and Biden was stammering on the side about whether he would attend, but Trump had basically agreed behind the scenes that he was willing to debate Jo Jorgensen if Joe Biden would agree to come. That he had agreed. We weren't able to pull that whole thing off, and then at the end there was even some discussion about him just doing it by himself. But time passed, and that trigger never got pulled. But he showed a willingness to do that all the way back then. I got to ask, because we're talking about the guy that wrote the Art of the Deal, right?
Yep.
He portrays himself as a bargainer, a wheeler dealer, a top level negotiator. There has to be some transactional nature to this. There's something to be gained. Now, it's pretty obvious to me that what is to be gained by the Libertarian Party is that they believe that this is a moment which will bring a lot of attention to the party and what the party's about and what it does, because he will bring his caravan of media and lights to Washington, D.C. and stand in their room in front of their signs, in front of their backdrops, and address them. And then they'll have an opportunity to bring all that media in and so forth. That part to me is completely clear. What is less clear to me is, what is his benefit? What do you think it is, Perry? What's the benefit to Donald Trump coming to the Libertarian National Convention. Why in the world would he agree to this? Why would he agree to be questioned or even to a joint appearance? He certainly doesn't need somebody to draw a crowd for him.
That's an excellent question. The only thing I can assume is that he thinks he's going to peel votes away from the Libertarian candidate, or perhaps that he might send some Biden votes toward RFKJ. I don't understand why he's doing it. Some people said the Mises caucus was a stalking horse for the Trump campaign. I guess we're going to get a chance here to see if that's true. Will his name be put in nomination for the Libertarian Party nomination by someone?
I think you have to guarantee that it will. You and I know, Perry, that the nature of the beast is that in order to be put into nomination, 5 delegates have to write his name down on a token.
And you can find 5 idiots to do anything.
Exactly. And so I expect that he will, in fact, now be nominated to be the Libertarian Party presidential candidate. How is he going to do? I hope not well. But in terms of what is
I want to clarify. You're saying he's going to be put into nomination.
I don't see any way it doesn't happen now, because all that has to happen. There's going to be roughly 1,000 delegates there.
Right, and it's the 5. I get that part, but he's not going to survive the first ballot of discussion. Like you can make it very easy to get on.
I don't see how he wouldn't survive the first round. I mean, the first round is going to eliminate, we know 6 people who are going to be on, but I guarantee you there's going to be like 14 to 15 on the first ballot, and some of them are going to be, truly crazy people. There's a guy out in California, you probably know him, who attends all the all the Libertarian conventions dressed as a Union Army general.
Bill, you didn't tell me what you were doing in your spare time.
How'd you guess?
That guy, Daryl Reed, I think is his name, but he shows up, James Ogle, those guys, they're going to find ways to get nominated in the first round. Trump will be there, and he'll survive the first round, I suspect.
Okay, but he's not, this is something that will probably go multiple rounds, and he's not a player that's going to be competing against the people who've been spending their time out on the road. Wait a minute, Dan. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Come on. There's a process that's been going on for how long? You know the process like everybody else. Yeah. There's a process that's been going on for states to pick delegates. Okay.
Yeah.
You're going as from Maryland. Am I right on that?
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
So the delegates have already been picked from Maryland. I want you to identify just in your head and give me a number. I don't want any names. How many of the people that you're aware of that got picked from Maryland that are going to be going for him? And how many delegates do you have?
So let's talk about order of operations here. Maryland has 21 delegates.
Okay.
Of which our mutual friend, Steve Dosbach, gave me a breakdown based on names, who he thought they were. Over 50% Mises. I think that because we elect a chair.
Okay. Michael Heiss tells me they have a candidate. His name's Michael Rechtenwald. That is the guy. That guy has given up work. Like he had paying gigs that he no longer has in order to run for.
I have some swampland I need to sell you in Florida.
Okay, I understand he was he was on the payroll at Hillsdale College. He's not there now because of this. That he had a podcast which he had to which had sponsorship, which he had to kind of dial down, and that the Mises Institute, which is not affiliated with the Mises Caucus, there's a long-standing public policy organization down in. Well, they're not, Dan. They're a nonprofit.
No. I would say you also have to mention the fact that he is paying himself a salary for running for president out of the money that he's raised.
Why? Why do we have to mention that? We're talking about whether or not Trump can get delegates there. And then you're suggesting that the Mises people are going to vote for him. And I'm saying this guy is a valid candidate who has sacrificed things to do it. Is this all fake? And your real plan is to nominate Trump.
The order of operations is pretty clear. We're going to elect a chair before we do the presidential nomination. If Mark Rutherford wins for chair, Mises knows they don't have the vote to get Rechtenwald elected. At which point in time, what do? They haven't cast any ballots yet. do they start saying, yeah, we're going to endorse Trump? Because I certainly believe that the plan is that they're going to endorse Trump if Rechtenwald doesn't get the nomination.
Okay, I just want to be clear about two things. One, Michael Heiss has said overtly to me in a phone call just yesterday that that is not the intention of anybody that he is associated with. He has no knowledge of anybody having suggested anything like that.
They've said that for 4 years, and yet here we are with Donald Trump speaking at the Libertarian National Convention.
This is the second thing I want to say. The proof in the pudding is whether or not what you just said actually happens.
Yeah.
Okay. If it doesn't happen, though, then it was wrong. Because this all the conditions, you're just suggesting this, and I want to be clear and make sure everybody understands. All the necessary conditions for what the plan has been to make Donald Trump the nominee are now going to be physically present that May weekend. And if they don't actually pull any triggers to make that happen, if you don't see the power players in the Mises caucus moving in that direction, then that really wasn't their plan all along.
No. So first of all, I disagree because I
on what basis?
I don't think. I said that I think that he will go if he gets nominated, he will go further than 3 rounds. I don't think he's going to win because I think that there are enough people in the Mises caucus who have become disaffected, but that still are polled as Mises.
There's enough people in the Mises caucus that don't associate. I know people in the Mises caucus that would not vote for Trump on a bet. Right.
Exactly. No,
they would do the same thing that you did, where they would say, well, I've got some ethical considerations here that I can't, that's not something I can do.
Right. But I mean, it's kind of like being Cassandra in that, for 4 years, people have been saying, well, at least for 2 years, people have been saying, this is the plan. This is the plan.
I'm aware that they've been saying it.
And I'm saying Donald Trump himself specifically
if every single thing is in place for this to happen, he's there, he's physically there, and he's been put on the ballot by Mises caucus people. And then they say, we're going to either A, give him the nomination, somehow they're going to figure out how to do that, instead of Michael Rechtenwald, or B, they're going to break off and start supporting him. And I'm talking about the people who are leading this caucus, the people who are leading in the various states. Yeah. Then you might actually have a valid case.
I think that there's a 50% chance that Trump does better than Rechtenwald on the ballot. I don't think he can beat.
You're a betting man. Would you bet it?
50%? Absolutely. $20 right here says that Trump finishes higher than Rechtenwald.
I'll take your bet.
All right.
Right here on the air, I'll take your bet.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go. Let it be noted.
Duly noted. I want to be clear.
Now I'm going to nominate Trump, and stump for him.
Yeah.
Anything for $20.
Wait a minute. $20 changes your ethics. That's
he won't do anything, just about anything to get Ross Ulbricht a pardon, but he'll do anything for $20.
Exactly.
But gentlemen, unless we have something newsworthy about this whole convention, if in fact Trump does appear, it's going to be forgotten in a month.
So it'll be forgotten. However, Donald Trump, we would go back to the circle that started this. What is the quid pro quo? What is Donald Trump getting out of this? What he's really getting out of this is what he said. Jo Jorgensen cost him the presidency. In Georgia, Chase Oliver got 2.5% of the vote. And he was a dynamic libertarian candidate. He caused the runoff between Warnock and Walker. And Donald Trump lost Georgia, as he famously told what's the Secretary of State's name? Rafflesberger?
Yes.
He said, if you could find me 18,000 votes. Well, guess how many votes Jo Jorgensen got in Georgia? More than 18,000. That's his goal, right? And the sort of goal of the Mises caucus.
Okay, wait a minute. This gets back to a question I asked earlier. So his motivation is to come in and neutralize the Libertarian Party, get the Libertarian Party's votes. Like, how does that work? What are the mechanics of it? Dan,
I think
listen, put on the devil's cap right now. Okay. Be that advocate and say, what would you do if you were Donald Trump? Why did you accept this invitation? What is your next strategy here?
If I were Donald Trump, I would come in and say, there's a huge opportunity here. I can't do the imitation, but
it's got a lot of Massachusetts in it.
Yeah, I wish I could do a better one because it's the right time for it. But he would say, look, there's this huge opportunity here for the Libertarian Party. He's like, you guys don't have to be the people that have always been forgotten. You can be the first people who said, we signed up for Trump. You can be the first of my servants who came to me and said, we will execute your will on earth. That's what he thinks is going to happen.
You'll find a barf bag in the seat back in front of you.
Right. He's going to say to the Libertarians, and the thing is, some of them will do it because, I'm going to butcher this quote, Jim, but you can help me out. That the reason that there are all these false messiahs that come is because people are desperate for them. And there are people in the Libertarian Party who are desperate for the idea that somebody that looks like a libertarian. And, Trump is overweight. He is a toxic white male. He looks like a libertarian. Sorry, I'm just kidding. But wow. He is. Trump has some libertarian positions, right? I can't argue with that. But he's so wrong on so many things, right? A guy who used eminent domain for personal gain. How could any libertarian support that? I'm not going to list it. Everybody can list all the reasons why Trump is wrong. He's coming there to get the people who want to be with. You want to be with a winner. You want to be with a winner. I can't do it again, but he's going to get the libertarians who want that, and he's already won a lot of the battle because libertarians are not going to get ballot access in a lot of states because the Libertarian Party, funded by MAGA money, didn't do anything for ballot access.
How many states are they going to get ballot access?
I'm guessing it's going to be
a number.
I'm guessing 40.
Okay, which would be lower because they're typically able to get 49 or 50 state ballots. Okay,
we did 50 in 2 consecutive elections. We did 50 during COVID.
We did, yeah, and we did 50 back in the day as well.
Okay. Of all the things that Mises Caucus is blamed for, the de-emphasis on ballot access is the one that I think is the most egregious. Because what do we have that RFKJ and all the other people who at the last minute decide they want to run for president don't have? We have ballot status. We've worked at it for years to get it. And to de-emphasize that, one of the great strengths of the party, I think, is it was a huge mistake.
So, and that's another thing. I don't think RFK is going to get on 25 state ballots.
I don't know. He's spending a tremendous amount of money.
Okay. And putting a billionaire on his ticket is the best thing he could have done to make me wrong. I completely
100%. And it is, you can buy ballot access. It's incredibly expensive. Signatures are going for $14 right now in New York. $14 a signature.
Wow.
But now think about it. They only needs 100,000 signatures, right? So that's 1.4 million. Yeah. That's nothing. That is nothing to their campaign.
Perry, Dan and I are going back and forth here a bit. I'm curious, what are we missing? What did we get wrong? Especially Dan. Fill in some blanks for us.
Gosh, I wish I could. I don't really have any additional thoughts. Man, I've been out of the loop so long that a lot of the stuff you guys are talking about, I don't even know about. So I may not have been the best guest to bring on.
No, speak to the audience because I'm not an insider on this, but it's meaningful to me as a third-party voter. And ballot access is a big thing. I mean, do we have ballot access on the 7 battleground states? If not, we're meaningless.
Yeah,
Interestingly enough, the Libertarian Party used to always maintain a map that showed active ballot access status.
Yeah.
They're not doing that now. Chase Oliver is running one. I'll take a look real quick and tell you what he thinks. But in that space, this is a battle. There are a lot of people who are libertarians who look at what's happened and they say, we are a party of failure. We've never elected a president. We've never elected anybody to really significant office. All the things that we argue about, we're still arguing about. But it's not true. Thanks to Perry And the guys in the 80s and the 90s, when nobody else was talking about it, marriage equality is the law of the land now, because libertarians fought for that consistently from 1972 through to 2012. When Barack Obama was elected, both he and Hillary Clinton said during the campaign, marriage is between a man and a woman. The only people who were saying that anybody should be able to get married were libertarians. And finally, we moved that needle. We moved the needle because we never moved ourselves. And that's the critical element of it.
I think the Libertarian Party, despite all of its many problems, has been profoundly beneficial for the libertarian movement. For the reason Dan just said, and because, like it or not, the LP presidential campaign is where most people encounter libertarian ideas for the first time. And if you're not on the ballot in a state, what's the point of the candidate going there and doing interviews and appearing on radio talk shows in that state? So de-emphasizing ballot access was bad for the party, good for Trump probably. But to get back to the question of the show as a whole, I think that he controls this event and the LP doesn't. And if somehow they could have made an agreement with him that they could actually enforce, which I doubt, there probably were things that we could have gotten out of this that would make it a net benefit. But I kind of think it's going to end up being a Trump rally.
Perry, you do know the history. And one of the things that I have seen quite a bit over the last couple of years, full disclosure, I have not been a member of the party since 2003. And I've talked about why on the air here before and elsewhere. But it's the candidates that I end up voting for. But I wanted to throw this I hope this may be my last question out to you. I've heard a lot of people in the last couple of years talk about how this is the end. This is it. And there's been people who've left the party and they've been getting very upset. And the division seems very, very deep and profound. And I think when people are living through interesting times, they tend to think that they are living through the very first set of interesting times ever. And the party has gone through pretty deep divisions and then come back. And this happens it's happened on state level constantly as well, but at the national level, there's been some pretty big divides. There's been some pretty big civil wars in this process. Is there still a place in our day for the Libertarian Party? Will the Libertarian Party survive this time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every single president.
And should it?
Yeah, absolutely. To that too, for the reasons I said earlier. The history of the party, and I think the history of any democratically managed organization, is that there's constant faction fights, constant scandals, constant doomsday, that this is going to be the death of us. And none of those predictions turned out to be true. The party's still here. It's had some of its best results recently at the in terms of votes for the presidential ticket. It's still going to be here, and it still has a job to do, which is to get the libertarian word out. So whatever happens with this, it's going to be just another event in a long string of events.
I want to tack on to that. Perry could not be more right. The Libertarian Party will, I believe, survive. But the only thing that Republicans and Democrats truly agree upon is that's not what they want to see happen. Okay? They resent the idea that there are people out there stealing their votes, because Republicans and Democrats believe that they own the people's votes, and they're dividing them amongst themselves. And when there's a third party involved, that ruins it. Trump said Jo Jorgensen cost him the election. So why is he showing up at a libertarian event? Is he showing up there because he thinks he's going to get libertarian voters? Is he showing up there because he thinks that doing so strengthens the Libertarian Party? Or is he showing up there because he thinks in the long run it weakens the Libertarian Party and it weakens a force of voters that he believes voted for somebody else and cost him the election?
So I hope that the people on the convention floor do get to ask questions. I hope they end up asking good questions. I hope they're polite, don't boo him. And I also hope they don't give him a standing ovation at the end of the speech. And I hope they ask him to pardon Julian Assange and Russ Ulbricht. If they can't do those things, I don't see what we get out of this.
Okay. And we're going to put a stop there. Dan Fishman, Perry Willis, who joined me with like last minute notice. And we stayed a little longer than we planned. So I just want to thank you gentlemen both for your words of wisdom and for sharing with us today. Thank you.
Good talking to you guys.
I'm glad to finally make it onto the show.
Glad you're here, Dan. Perry, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Interesting conversation. Some things I agree with, some big points I think were missed for like the average bear. A lot of stuff.
Wait a minute. What's an example of a big thing that was missed?
Okay, so the most salient points for me were, why is Donald Trump doing this? What's his motivation?
I don't think anybody's clear on that. And Dan did
right.
finally offer something, but I don't think
he finally got around
clear.
to it. He finally got around to it.
But when he was initially asked the question, it's like so, and this is a big thing for me. Like in all of this, I'm thinking about empathy all the time, right? Like, and that empathy applies whether you are at war or whether you are trying to secure peace, right? You have to have some intelligence and understanding of what the other side is up to. And it's not entirely clear to me what the benefit to him is here. He can get a crowd anywhere he wants. He can get media anywhere he wants. He can get it any day of the week he wants.
He doesn't need this,
He doesn't need this. So, I talked to a few different people yesterday, and then people would say, as they do, because politics is about gossip and faction fighting. That's what it's all about. All right. If you didn't have gossip, you wouldn't have a political party. And so I keep getting sworn to secrecy, and I'm sitting here saying, not knowing what I can or cannot say. And I'd be like, well, why, I'm trying to figure out what's going on and get at the truth. And I'm, how do I do that here? So even now, and the people I spoke to, if they're watching, you tongue tied me because I can't even remember all the different things you said. Well, don't repeat this, don't repeat that, but here's what's really going on, or here's what we think, or here's what we suspect is going to come, or don't quote me on that, because they, in some cases, people are pretty exercised, right? But if it weren't for gossip and faction fights, you wouldn't have a party. And I don't know that anybody has actually taken the time to really answer the question, what does Donald Trump get out of this? It seems to me that he wants to win the libertarian vote. And it might just be as simple and transparent as that. And that he's being given an opportunity to do it.
Well, why would the Libertarian Party do that? See, that if that in fact is the case,
okay, I'm gonna steel man their view right now.
Whether I agree with $20 on the line, you better be careful.
Well, that had to do with how Michael Rechtenwald's going to do.
No, I know.
And Dan picked that for a reason. It's like an acid test. If their guy doesn't get the votes and they start giving the votes to Donald Trump, then it wasn't really about their guy all along. That's why he picked the right bet to make.
Yep.
He's going to lose, by the way. We should have upped it to $100 or $200. He's going to lose. But because I've met so many of these Mises Caucus people. I know a guy here locally who considers himself to be more of a Mises Caucus type of person. I have a guy that just texted me yesterday on a completely unrelated matter that I do some occasional, I'm hoping to do quite a bit more work with, who considers himself a Mises Caucus guy. They don't approve of everything they hear and see all the time, but they're definitely hardcore libertarians. One of my best Facebook friends throughout the pandemic. We've never met face to face, but I would look for his posts. In fact, part of the reason I would get on Facebook during the early days of the pandemic would be to see if he posted something. Hardcore, part of that group and tribe. I've toured with Tom Woods. We were on the same stages together. Tom is one of the people that kind of is almost one of the founding fathers of that movement. So I know these people, and I got a sense, from my experience with them, what it is that makes them tick and motivates them and whatever. They're pretty sincere fellows. So I don't really, there's a certain amount of like shiftiness here at play that I don't really buy. I don't really think is going to happen. I also don't think I share both of their opinion that this isn't the end of the party. But Trump is that's the main question here, is what he's doing. I think it's just bare, transparent. He's going to come in and make an appeal, maybe even an appeal that they don't run a candidate. period. Like, listen, you really need to come to me. And the hardcore delegates is kind of the worst place to do it, but it's in Washington, D.C. It's the rank and file that are more likely to break from the party than the people that attend that event, that have taken the time to pay for themselves to go there. These people that go to libertarian conventions are the truest of true believers.
Yeah,
and unlike the Republican and Democrat conventions, which are massively funded through taxpayer resources and through a ton of corporate sponsorship, I attended the 2016 Republican convention in Cleveland. I was in the media, Radio Row. I was working in Radio Row with Gary Nolan. And I got to go into the building the first day. It was locked down after that, but I got to go into the building and walk around the hall that was on television, stood on the stage for a second, got to do that whole thing. And I will tell you, the amount of money that was flowing through at that moment is just, you can't even begin to conceive. This will be held at a hotel. This will be paid for by the people who came. That's how it's going to be funded. And so this is the hardest core audience for him to go out and attempt to get. But I think that for him, it's simply about those Jo Jorgensen votes. And I think he's going to just simply make an appeal. I don't think it's at this hour, I don't think it's any more complicated than that. I also think there's a really good chance he doesn't actually physically show, or they don't get to ask him questions. And and Perry's bringing up a valid point. There is a degree to which I've two libertarians I've spoken to, and another one I've read in the last 24 hours has suggested that that this is sacred ground for the Libertarian Party. A convention is, we've come together to highlight our candidate. And now we're bringing somebody in who will do something that overshadows that. Like any other time would be okay to do some kind of joint event, except this time. And the Libertarians over the years have shown a remarkable, and it's been a hallmark of my career at Downsize DC, remarkable ability to reach across lines and form alliances with people on single issues. And, one of the places that, for example, I think they're going to want to have a single issue relationship with Robert Kennedy, because he's already experiencing how hard it is to get on the ballot. There will be lawsuits. Not everything will be settled or out of the laundry by election day. That's one of the games that the establishment plays. They might decide he wins a lawsuit in 2026. You know what I mean? Fat amount of good that'll do him after November. Yeah. So having an alliance to go into those battles in the future is a valid, good thing to do. It's a smart thing to do. But I don't know. Does any of that answer any of the question that you were attempting? What else did we miss?
It's one of those things you have to wait and see, because there's no predicting this guy.
Right.
But I tend to feel like this is a lose for Libertarian Party.
Okay. So I told you a moment ago I would attempt to steelman it. And I just want to say that every time someone tries to do something that's historically big and out of the box, criticism is part of what goes with it, because it's different from what everybody's always done.
Sure.
Right. That's how new things happen. And people don't like change, and they think of all the risks and the things that could go wrong, and they say no. And in this case, this is politics. So there's already built up animosities. The answer was that it was wrong because of who did it. It's so wrong, honestly, from their opposition side, that if the opposition found out that they had a chance to invite him and then said, go to hell, you can't come to our show, that there might have been some people that might like, well, see, they don't even know how to take advantage of a PR movement, right?
Right.
I don't think that would have happened in this instance, because I know enough of the people on the other side too to say that they're fairly sincere in their beliefs as well, and pretty consistent. And I think that they actually find Trump. A lot of the people in the Mises, not in the Mises Caucus, it's really kind of common that there's more of a right lean, even though the Mises Caucus would deny it, to the Mises Caucus side. They're more socially conservative in general. And then on the people that are critical of it, there's more of a leftward lean. Nick Sarwark's name came up quite a bit. He took a very strong stance about the science during the pandemic, for example. There is kind of a cultural divide here in terms of what issues they prioritize, which ones they think are what things are at stake. And even sometimes they pick issues that the other side wouldn't, that sound a little more conservative or a little more progressive. So there's a breakdown there. I do think they would have stayed consistent. My point is on whether or not to invite Trump.
Not convinced. I think you make the observation this is about retribution for Jo Jorgensen. And from what I've seen of this guy, that's the thing that motivates him. He doesn't get motivated by something that's a forward-looking, positive kind of vision for the future. He gets motivated by the delicious tears of his enemies, as we like to say here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And he will do everything that he can to take the Libertarian Party apart piece by piece or all at once if he can drop a big enough A-bomb on it.
And showing up is literally being the A-bomb.
Right. Layman's opinion from outside the party structure.
No.
Right?
I think all of this is valid, and I think it's worth discussing. And I would say, we have emphasized here on this show from a Grace perspective, there are times where you need heuristics and you have to make instant decisions. But there's also quite a few times more in life where if you took a wait and see attitude, the truth will emerge over time.
Yeah, I agree with you about this. We have to wait and see. We really do.
All right, let me throw out one other thing. There is a rumor floating around that a major pardon, Dan, I think, alluded to it in the show, maybe Perry, I don't remember which one did now, that a major pardon is floating around. There's some danger here because there was a name mentioned during the episode, and I happen to know his mom, and she would not want his name mentioned in this context because she's trying not to offend anybody, and she's trying to get all sides to do the most important thing, which is to free her son. But there's another name that's floating out there as well. That's a much bigger name. It's a household name. It's Julian Assange, and it was Trump's Justice Department that turned up the heat and decided that this needed to be a charge, and that they needed to really go after him, which I find offensive. And given especially how Trump benefited from WikiLeaks during the 2016 campaign, it's just completely. This is one of the evidences to me that he was a very poor chief executive. That he seemed to be run by his staff. He didn't seem to know how to hire. It was like a reality TV show where there were no consequences for hiring and firing. And the national security people managed to pull the wool over his eyes quite a few times. They did it on this. They did it on the release of the papers for the Kennedy assassination. They did it on on war with Syria. He did wake up and stop a bombing run at one point. They tried to get him in a war with Iran. I mean, he did at moments seem to understand some of it, but for the most part, didn't have a coherent theme in what he was doing. There's things that he did that kind of put logs on the fire that led to Ukraine. There could have been some dialing down of that whole thing there. Same thing with what's going on in Jerusalem right now. There's a series of things. I just think he just wasn't aware, but I do think he cares a lot about the race and the politics and the TV and how his image and those things he's almost a savant at. And you may be right. Maybe this is where he drops the A-bomb on the party. I want to throw out a couple more thoughts before we close. We're running long here, but hopefully the people that are most interested in this will have tuned in to the very end. If there is a pardon that's coming out of this, then we could say something really good was redeemed from it. Something valid, something valuable.
But wait a minute, is that a qualified if Trump is elected pardon, or is that a pardon that Biden can issue now as a political favor?
Well, Biden hasn't, and these pardons tend to come at the end of a presidential term, particularly when a president's leaving office.
Right. So
Biden's spate of pardons, the best way to get a spate of pardons out of Biden would be to not reelect him. In fact, maybe that should be a new theme. Every 4 years, we don't reelect the guy because that way we get more pardons.
Depends on how bad the last 4 years have been.
I don't know. They tend to all be bad. I mean, we keep seeming to go downhill a little bit faster and further.
But I derailed your train.
I think it's key that they're able to ask questions. I think Absolutely. If a pardon came out of this that redeems this a significant amount. I don't think this stands the long test of time, but I keep trying to come back to a grace frame. And maybe I'm too much of an idealist. And I don't hear anybody making the particular argument I'm about to make. You didn't hear it during the show. And I didn't hear it in any of the calls I had yesterday. But if I agree to have lemonade with you, a theme we've had on this show many times, right? The Klansman's walking down the street and you stop and say, "Hey, what's your deal, man?" come up here and sit down. Let's have a discussion. I want to understand your deal.
Yeah.
And you say, that's crazy. We can't do that. We got to have justice. You can't talk to those people. They need to be written off. But the problem here is that Daryl Davis has done precisely that. And he's changed people, and they've taken off their robes and they've handed them to him and let him hang those same robes up in his closet instead as a trophy for having made a relationship with people and helping them see that their views weren't right. And he did it through relationship. Now, I don't know what comes out of the meeting here. I have no idea what the serendipities are that come out of something. I know that things tend to work together for good in a lot of ways, especially when you're looking for them. I don't know if maybe somebody in Trump's camp ends up becoming more libertarian as a result of this. I don't know if it ends up having a backfire effect on him in terms of like how his ability to get his message out and maybe more people see the Libertarian Party. I don't know if that happens. It is in the realm of possibility. But what I know is that when a dialogue starts to happen, light gets shown. And Trump has this huge lamp that he's going to bring in and shine in the Libertarian Party. And it might be that that's the first exposure people have to it, and they start to move. And I've been told, well, they're just going to be MAGA heads. Well, maybe they were. But if you knew me in 1996, I was an Alan Keyes supporter. I was as Christian right as you could be. And Alan Keyes' number one issue was pro-life, ending abortion. And I came into the party, and here's my experience, and I've seen it repeatedly, is that people that get involved strongly tend to become more libertarian, even voluntarist or anarchist over time, not less, because they start to think through the issues and they start to have new associations and friendships. And they have new things, materials to read. Something entered their echo chamber for the very first time. And conversely, I can't help thinking that libertarians don't have all the answers. That there may be something that they get a chance to hear themselves that maybe impacts their life or their view of the world and how they want to go about doing things. And I'm less certain of that because I've spent a lot of time and a lot of years in this movement, and I've heard a lot of people's objections to the libertarian arguments. And to the degree that you're trying to say that libertarianism isn't going to work, I don't think that flies. For me, I've become more voluntarist over time. But I don't rule that out. Like, I feel like I have a duty to kind of listen. And you can't help noticing that people are at each other's throats and they're fighting even over their own, holiday tables with their own family. That this has caused division politics has caused division between friends. And I know some people would say, it happened all the time, but I've been at this, since I was in my teens, I've been active and interested in following this. And I don't remember a time like the time that we've had since Donald Trump won. I don't remember a level of division that rivaled anything like we had in COVID, where everything has become about politics and people are literally deciding they can't have relationships because of it. And so is there a moment here where two opposing rival groups are in the same place, in the same moment, at the same time? And I think the odds are low, but maybe a chance that they're civil towards one another. And this starts to bring maybe a tiny bit of harmony and healing to the country as a whole, and shows us that it's not too dangerous to actually talk. So let me be clear, because right now there are people with their teeth on edge with what I just said. I'm not sure this was a good idea. Strategically and politically, it may well not have been. But on a grace level, it almost couldn't help but have been good.